Something that we discuss, not in a broad basis. We know about heart attacks, we know about strokes and different things, excuse me, different things, but a lot of times there are other factors that definitely play a role into heart health. Nutrition is very important to me. As Rolanda highlighted, I do have a bachelor's in hospitality and food service management. My dad is a chef by trade. I grew up, in the kitchen and in several work areas that allowed me to spend time in that environment. And then I ventured into becoming a registered dietitian. I'm also a certified diabetes educator, but nutrition is my passion, cooking, healthy eating. So I'm excited to highlight the many benefits of healthy eating, and things that are affordable, practical, things you may already be doing and don't realize that I am on a really good path. And my intention is also for you to learn a little bit more today. I'll be discussing a lot of great benefits and how we can partner together in the future for promoting heart health, not just for yourself today, but even for your family members. If you know of someone, people that are close to you that definitely could benefit from a little insight into nutrition. So let us discuss our first concept when it comes to heart health and nutrition. Heart health and dietary intake is really important. We always hear about balance. We hear discussions about what it means to eat healthy, put more greens on your plate, more fruits and vegetables. But what really does that mean overall? Now, our cardiovascular system, of course, contains our heart. It also contains our blood vessels, our capillary system, those things that help blood flow and pump really strong and healthy throughout our system and our body. And we have to keep that flowing, and things like high blood pressure, even flutters. I know there were some questions about different heart conditions we'll get into at the end, but in its entirety we want to focus on our entire cardiovascular system. So that is best supported with fruits and vegetables, everything from a banana to oranges to kiwis, strawberries, also a lot of whole grains, and we'll discuss some of the whole grains that you may already be consuming, things that you may not have known that you can add to your plate in several different ways. Lean protein is another huge aspect of our dietary intake. We want to aim for things that are leaner in terms of less saturated fat, and helping us to promote our cardiovascular function. Now, the CDC, also known as the Center for Disease Control, and the American Heart Association have spent many years, decades, putting together research and lots of funding and things behind the studies that give us insight into different chronic conditions that affect the general population when it comes to heart disease. So with that being said, some of the basic guidelines from the CDC and the American Heart Association include reducing sodium intake and added salt in our meals. It also includes limiting added sugar. And we'll talk about the added sugars versus the natural sugars that we find in most foods, and also looking at limiting saturated fats, which is a big part of the American diet. Now, when it comes, excuse me, also to key components of nutrition and benefits of heart health, we'll discuss a little bit about fiber and dietary fiber, what it means to eat your recommended amount of dietary fiber, in addition to antioxidant-rich foods, things that contain a little bit more than your basic nutrients that can help fight some of these chronic conditions, such as high blood pressure, high cholesterol, prediabetes, diabetes, your kidney function. All of those are found and better supported when we have a diet with antioxidants. Inflammation is a big one. We see inflammation in chronic diseases, but we also see inflammation can be present itself in the acute phase. So it could be something as common as a respiratory condition, whether it's a common cold, a flu, even sometimes COVID, to the more chronic conditions like high cholesterol, which leads to hardening of the vessels and the capillary systems, and making sure that plaque doesn't form, and in a really extreme case can lead to heart attack and stroke. So all about inflammation and reducing that is important as well. Consistency with our healthy diet makes a difference. In addition to physical activity, always staying active, moving your body, whether it is taking some steps throughout the day, breaking up your sedentary time at least 1 hour. Every hour, it's recommended that you stand, stretch, move around. That will get your blood flowing, your heart pumping, and it will reduce the amount of time you're sitting in general. So all of those things promote long-term cardiovascular health. Now, when it comes to nutrition and the importance of heart disease, regular physical activity is a big part. So the recommendation is at least 150 minutes, or it can be a little bit more for people who enjoy different types of activities. We all have sometimes people like to do group activities, whether that's a session with yoga. Pilates is really popular. I have a lot of friends that do Pilates, but you can also get out in your local community, walk in the evenings and in the early mornings in the park and different places and get some steps in. So physical activity can be as simple or more extravagant as you need it to be, depending on your preference. But the goal is to achieve at least that 150 minutes a week with physical activity. It could be moderate. Some people do low impact for better support of joints and bone strength, but some people do enjoy also the vigorous physical activity. So that can be running, that can be a kickboxing class. So there's a lot of different ways that you can keep your body moving. Also, some recommendations from the CDC for heart disease and lowering our risk for these chronic conditions include avoiding the use of tobacco as much as possible, looking into programs that help with smoking cessation, is really popular as well and highly recommended. Now, the whole benefit of going to a primary care doctor, having a regular routine physical at least once a year on an annual basis, allows us to know what our blood pressure is. Our blood pressure is really important to know your target blood pressure, where you need to be in terms of a top number and a bottom number, also known as your systolic and your diastolic numbers. But in general, the recommendation is to have those numbers 130 or below, over 80 and below. So when it gets to a level greater than 130 or greater than 80, we're looking at different stages of hypertension, stages 1, 2, and sometimes even extreme hypertension, stage 3, which can come with other things like kidney disease and heart failure in some cases. So routine physical screening with your primary care doctor lets you know what your blood pressure is, also gives you a baseline for your cholesterol panel. We have a lot of different numbers when we go to the doctor and we get our labs drawn and then we get the results, and sometimes we get overwhelmed as to what these numbers mean. And then we get on the internet and we start Googling and we ask AI and we ask ChatGPT to give us insight into the values and results of our lab. But I will always strongly suggest consulting with your doctor, your primary care, for the best and most realistic answer when it comes to your lab results, because your parameters for your blood pressure, your cholesterol can be different from your best friend, your sister, your mom. So everyone has their own individual needs for their heart and actually their whole body and the way it functions. So routine monitoring is definitely important. Next, we'll talk a little bit about alcohol consumption. So the recommendation, just like we're talking about physical activity and promoting that, a balanced diet and having more things on our plate, avoiding smoking and the use of tobacco, we want to promote moderate consumption of alcohol. And what that is in terms of recommendation is for men, no more than two alcoholic beverages per day and one for women. So what that would look like is a glass of wine after work, or let's say you're going out to dinner and you're having a nice meal and you want a glass of wine. At least a 6, maybe a 7-ounce pour glass of wine, depending on the restaurant and what their menu offers. Or even if you're at home and you have a wine glass, available, you want to be moderate with your consumption of alcohol. That can also be beer, and that can also be, which is about a 12-ounce uh, pint of beer, or a 1.5-ounce shot or pour of any kind of spirit. So whether it's vodka, gin, rum, you want to be moderate with your alcohol consumption. And that's because the higher and more alcohol that we consume, takes our body into a different place in terms of metabolism, especially when it comes to the liver. When we tend to have a little bit more alcohol intake, our liver gets preoccupied with trying to metabolize the alcohol. For people who have pre-existing conditions or other comorbidities such as diabetes, their blood sugar management gets a little bit confused in the body when you introduce alcohol. So you want to be mindful that there isn't a risk of high or low blood sugars. Okay. So next we'll talk a little bit about the guidelines in terms of putting together a plate. And we are all familiar with what a plate looks like. There's a diagram here on the screen that talks about splitting your plate into different sections. And it's a lot of times we get our plate and we try to like pile our plate high and do Thanksgiving kind of serving more than once. But sometimes if you take a step back, look at your plate and realize like I didn't have enough color, right? I'm missing a little bit of greens. I could be missing carrots. Maybe it can be eggplant, just a lot of color on your plate. It gives you the opportunity to see you're missing some kind of key nutrient in your diet. So when you get your plate, you have an opportunity to say, let's fill my plate up in different sections and see what I'm missing. The recommendation is always based off of a 9-inch dinner plate. And that's pretty standard. Whether you're at home, you're in a restaurant, 9-inch dinner plate is the standard. Anything smaller is kind of deemed like an appetizer serving, but a 9-inch dinner plate is standard. You split the plate down the middle, and a quarter of your plate should start with some kind of grains. And when we say grains, that can also mean starch interchangeably. And what that will mean is, let's say you love potato, and you want to be mindful of your portion of potato, whether it's mashed potato, whether it's French fries, whether it's a baked potato, a quarter of that plate will start with some kind of grains. We always recommend as much as possible that you support your digestion with whole grains, which can be things that are typically brown. So whole grains will be examples of whole grains would be brown rice, quinoa. You could think about having whole wheat pasta, for example, and that will be some ways that you can get whole grains into your diet. So if you consume, let's say for lunch, you have white rice, and for dinner, you have another type of starch or grains, but it's more regular potato. You should take the opportunity to have one of those two meals, lunch or dinner, be a whole grain instead of both of those um, items on your plate being filled with things that are a little bit more starchy, right? And not enough dietary fiber. The other quarter of the plate, right below grains, should place emphasis on lean protein. And you may not always eat lean protein. Lean protein are more so examples of poultry, so chicken or turkey, things that are boneless if possible, but definitely skinless for the most part, because the skin, while it gets crispy and juicy from like fried chicken, or even if you bake your chicken and you leave the skin on there, the skin does hold fat. So you want to be mindful of holding on to a lot of that skin when you do your poultry. The other types of protein include beef. And when it comes to beef, the recommendation is as lean as possible. So when you're in the supermarket and you're picking up any kind of ground meat, you're looking for 85% lean, 15% fat. So you don't have to be afraid of the fat, but you want to have more lean than fat in your protein. The other recommendation is if you're doing a whole piece of steak or pork, like a pork chop, that you have that area that's kind of white and that trim that you can remove. That is where a lot of the fat is. So if you trim your meats and have a good ratio when it's ground, more lean and less fat, you're headed in the right direction with your types of protein. That protein section can also include plant-based proteins. So I know we talk a lot about animal protein, beef, pork, chicken, fish, turkey, things like that. But plant-based protein is an excellent way to meet your dietary needs and get fiber as well, because a lot of the plant-based proteins also serve as a form of whole grain. You can also think of plant-based proteins as being very low in calories, which we know that they have less fat, less calories, which are better for our cardiovascular system and our overall heart health. So lean protein, I actually encourage a lot of my patients and people that I work with, even my family members, my coworkers, to at least incorporate one plant-based protein a week. If you can't do it on a weekly basis, you can try it, every 2 weeks, but there's a lot of options out there for plant-based protein. I had the wonderful opportunity to do a cooking class last week, and we did black bean burgers. And I incorporated a lot more veggies into the black bean burgers. So it was black beans, it was mushrooms, onions, and the star of the show for that particular black bean burger was beets. And a lot of people were skeptical because the beets tend to not get enough love and recognition, but beets are a wonderful way to get a source of potassium. You'll get a lot of iron from beets, you'll get magnesium, and all of those minerals definitely support heart health. So when you combine it with something like black beans and you season it and give it that smoky flavor, they were wonderful. They couldn't get enough of those black bean burgers. So I encourage you to really try to incorporate a plant-based protein at least once a week or every couple of weeks. Tofu is another great example. A lot of people are afraid of tofu because it just looks like, nothing spectacular, but you can really take tofu. It is, think of it like a blank canvas where you can really season it and alter the taste as much as you would like. I personally get the extra firm tofu. I squeeze all of that extra liquid out. I cut it up into small chunks. I coat it, I air fry it, toss it in a little bit of like a sesame sweet chili sauce, and that's how I like my tofu. So don't be afraid of getting tofu in your diet. Excellent source of calcium, iron, and vitamin D as well. Speaking of some of those excellent benefits in tofu, we'll discuss a little bit more about foods that have different colors and what those colors represent in terms of nutrients and natural occurring compounds in our plant-based foods and our overall diet. So when I was mentioning the beets that were highlighted last week, you think about something that's purple, like foods that are purple, whether it is beets, like that purple reddish color, blueberries, grapes. Um, if you think about purple sweet potato, those items that have that purple, dark red color are naturally occurring items that contain a compound called anthocyanin, and they are great for antioxidants and fighting off a lot of the infection and inflammation in your body. So when you see those dark blue, purple kind of fruits and vegetables, feel free to add some to your plate. Our next common fruits and vegetables we want to highlight are those with the orange color. Sweet potatoes, pumpkin, carrots, those are filled with beta carotene. And beta carotene is actually a precursor to vitamin A. And we need vitamin A in our body for a lot of different reasons. Vitamin A is very important for growth and development, especially for women who are pregnant and going through the stages of like fetal development. Vitamin A is essential in those early stages. Vitamin A is also important for our skin when we're looking to, reduce wrinkles and those lines that may come about, pores and things like that. That's where vitamin A comes in. And vitamin A is really important for our eye health and making sure like we have a good sense of vision, our retinal health and things like that. So don't be afraid to add some of those orange colored foods onto your plate. Next, we look at things that contain the isoflavones, excuse me, the isoflavone category, excuse me, contain a group. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. So that group, those other set of compounds that contain lots of antioxidants are found in tofu, I was mentioning, chickpeas, lentils, that white and brown category, soy milk. Today, for our recipe, if anyone is following along, we'll be using edamame, which is a compound of soybeans. So that will be another highlight. And isoflavones are actually really important in terms of fighting off a lot of inflammation, oxidative stress, which is when the body's trying to, get rid of like these dead cells and clean up everything in the process of metabolism. And a good intake of soy is actually protective against a lot of cancers, whether it's breast cancer, cervical cancer, and helping us to have a healthy level of estrogen as women. So don't be afraid to include some soy into your diet. We also have our dark leafy greens, so kale, spinach, collard greens, turnip greens, even broccoli, asparagus, Brussels sprouts, anything that has that green color is another rich form of antioxidant, quercetin. And the quercetin compound, excuse me, is filled with not just the green color, as a phytonutrient, but also full of dietary fiber. So you definitely want to get some greens on your plate. A lot of times the challenge with eating things that are green and collard greens, and when we cook, a big pot of like those leafy greens, we tend to add smoked meats. So later we'll discuss some alternatives to add in a lot of the added sodium when we flavor our foods. Now, when it comes to certain beverages, black tea, green tea, even dark chocolate, we have another naturally occurring compound, the catechins, and the catechins are really a nice way to think about getting caffeine into your system without energy drinks, without the 5-hour shots or the Red Bulls and those kind of things. So you really want to think about going for things like dark chocolate, um, natural herbal tea, even coffee. Coffee, as we know it, is a probably $1 million-billion industry, right? But when you think about the natural compound of coffee and herbal teas, those are really, really amazing beverages in their natural state. The challenge is we've taken coffee and it's mass produced. That's one thing. And then we think about coffee coming from places like Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts, where it's full of foam and whip and pumps, and it's, 3 times the size of you drinking a beverage, and sugar sweetened beverages actually make up 60% of the calories in the American diet, which adds to more challenges with diabetes, heart disease, and things like that. So think about a nice natural cup of coffee, a little bit of sweetener, low calorie, zero sugar sweetener. There's many flavors that are available. But if you focus on the natural compounds in coffee, then you will see the benefits instead of a lot of the sugar and popular coffee drinks. I mean, nothing is wrong with getting like some seasonal items and maybe trying some of your favorites, but in general, we want to put more emphasis on the natural compounds in these teas. Now, resveratrol is a compound that you will find in red grapes. So therefore, if anyone enjoys red wine, you are actually getting a way. The resveratrol is actually important to protect your heart health because of the compound found in the red grapes. Now, wine comes in different forms, you know, the sweeter, the more wine that has a little bit more of a balance and a blend to it. But in moderation, the American Heart Association recommends a little bit of, you know, moderate intake because of the resveratrol found in red wine. Now let's talk about cooking and flavoring our foods. We sometimes get caught up in um, having a lot of added sodium. And a lot of added sodium actually does not come from just adding salt by itself. The added sodium that has been found to be a lot more challenging in the American diet is added sodium through prepackaged products. And you're like, probably like, Lonnie, everything's prepackaged. And that is true to an extent. We all eat prepackaged products, everything we buy, from a box of cereal to our favorite snack, chips. I love potato chips. I have to be mindful of my portion of potato chips, how often I have potato chips, but to an extent, everything is prepackaged and processed in some way. The goal is to be able to tell how much sodium and how much added fat and sugar we're looking at without making it more difficult for our health conditions and our overall metabolism, but still enjoying the flavors that come with it. So when we discuss cooking, we don't always have to start with salt. We can put emphasis on lots of herbs and spices, oregano, thyme, parsley, everything green, basil, mint leaves. You can also think about garlic. You can think about adding, if you want, crushed red pepper flakes. I like things that are spicy, so I always look for smoked paprika, crushed red pepper flakes, and I wait till the end to add salt. And that's because sometimes you don't need it. You know, salt is used as an enhancer. It shouldn't be something that you lead with, because, like I said, if you incorporate more of those herbs and spices, you have an opportunity to cut back on your salt intake. The other challenge is we would cook with salt, and then when we sit to the table, we add more salt without even tasting our food. And that could be as well, that could also be for when you're at home and you're cooking for your family. And sometimes by nature, people sit down and the first thing they do before they taste anything is they add salt at the table. So be mindful of what you're doing in the early stages when you're cooking and seasoning your food. Now, capsaicin is a natural occurring compound found in chili peppers, or all hot peppers, anything from a bell pepper, which has the minimal amount of capsaicin, to a Scotch bonnet or a habanero. And with that capsaicin, it's actually been shown to relax our blood vessels, lower blood pressure, and help with that whole flow in our cardiovascular system. Just a little bit of spice helps, and it goes a long way. Now, the recommended sodium intake, according to the American Heart Association, is a minimum of 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day. And a lot of times we're like, well, what does that number mean? 2,300 milligrams. And that is equivalent to a teaspoon of salt. And that's for the whole day. So if you're cooking with salt and then you're adding salt at the table, or you had something that was takeout or fast food, then you're not sure of how much salt I put in. And let's be honest, the salt gives everything flavor. And when it comes to like fast food and restaurant foods, they're always adding salt. So you want to be mindful because that's just a teaspoon a day. For people who already have pre-existing health conditions, whether it's kidney disease, um, diabetes, or maybe they are a little bit more on the overweight side, struggling with obesity, that 2,300 milligrams gets even less. It's somewhere closer to 1,500 milligrams, and that's to help protect other organs in in the body, right? Besides the heart, because we're looking at the kidneys, we're looking at the liver, we're looking at your pancreas and all those other organs. So having a better idea of what 2,300 milligrams looks like, the amount a teaspoon holds, gives you a better idea of limiting your sodium intake. Now, a lot of times we get questions about sea salt versus pink salt, pink Himalayan salt, and all these different types of salt. The body does not care where you get your salt from. The salt is still recognized as salt. The same thing with honey versus maple syrup versus table sugar, brown sugar. It's all sugar to the body. What makes a difference is where these items are sourced. So, of course, sea salt is heavy in minerals, right? They have sodium chloride. You'll get these trace minerals in salt that the body needs in small amounts. Pink Himalayan salt comes from the Himalayan mountains. So there's no difference in like the salt content. We're just looking at where they were cultivated from. Now let's talk about looking at a nutrition facts label because a lot of people may be intimidated when you get to the grocery store and you're trying to figure out, especially in places like the cereal aisle or the bread aisle. I feel like every time I go to the supermarket, those aisles are growing and growing and growing, and it's a new product that you may not have seen or heard about the last time you were at the grocery store. But today we'll talk briefly about how to identify key things on the nutrition facts label that can help you and save you in the long run with time, money, and most importantly, your health. So a lot of times with the nutrition facts label, someone picks it up, they look at the calories and they say, okay, less than 200 calories, I'm in good shape. And then they throw it in a cart and then they head out the checkout aisle and take the product home. And the calories is only a small factor of the overall facts that are contained on the nutrition facts label. Calories are important, but we have to start at the very top where it says serving size. And a lot of people bypass the serving size and they don't realize that 2/3 of a cup is what's recommended to give you 230 calories plus all the other nutrients. If you're doubling that 2/3 cup, you're doubling your calories, you're doubling the fat, doubling the sodium. Some things are good to be doubled, like dietary fiber or vitamin D or calcium or iron, but in all reality, you don't want to double a lot of things on the nutrition facts label. So looking at that serving size for 2/3 of a cup, is a good start. Then you work your way down to the calories. Okay, calories, depending on what the product is something to consider as well. Then you want to look at total fat and always think about keeping your saturated fat in the single digits because the saturated fat is what affects our cholesterol and our overall heart health the most. And we'll talk a little bit more about dairy and dietary fats. Then you want to be able to look at your cholesterol, and most foods are cholesterol free. There's some that aren't, but sometimes you'll see cholesterol zero, and that's a good thing because we have dietary cholesterol that we eat from certain products, but our body also makes what we call endogenous cholesterol, which is the cholesterol we can do nothing about. So you want to control your dietary cholesterol as much as possible. Then you want to look at sodium, and that's that magic word when we talk about extra salt and heart health, looking at sodium. So that 2,300 milligrams per day that the American Heart Association recommended is just a start. But what helps is cutting back on sodium at the dinner table when you're cooking, when you're dining out, and purchasing these prepackaged items. So the rule of thumb, if your sodium on the label in milligrams is less than or equal to the calories, you're in a good place. So, for example, for 2/3 cup, it's 230 calories. It's 180 milligrams of 160 milligrams of sodium. So this is a fair product. This is a really good item. For example, let's say it was brown rice or cereal or something, we're in a good place. If this sodium in milligrams was 500 or even 300 milligrams, I wouldn't necessarily select this product. I would look throughout the aisle for something that I can compare it to and make the best decision overall. Okay, so that's how you want to approach the sodium. Don't be intimidated. And I know it looks scary with all of the numbers and milligrams and things like that on the nutrition facts label. But the more you take a few seconds, minutes to compare two items, you'll be able to make better decisions. Let's talk about the hidden sources of sodium. What that could look like is a lot of things we love. Condiments is a big one. Ketchup, mustard, mayo, salad dressings is one of my favorite to mention to people because the salad dressings, especially the creamy ones, the ranch, the blue cheese, the French, Thousand Island, salad dressings are typically filled with a lot of fat and a lot of sodium. So, and to be honest, the serving size for most condiments is 1 to 2 tablespoons. And a lot of people drench their salads. Like no one even realizes that you're putting half a cup of dressing, for example. And then you are, again, doubling your fat, doubling your sodium, doubling your calories with the more product you use. Another source of hidden sodium are our snacks. Could be chips, could be cookies, could be candy, not so much, but like sometimes the sodium in a lot of our prepackaged snacks are used to preserve the food, right? So you want to be mindful of the sodium. Sodium gives flavor, but it's also heavily used as a preservative in like a different form. It's not the sodium um, or the salt that we use to cook, but there's different forms of sodium, sodium chloride, sodium potassium, um, sodium with different minerals mixed with it. So you want to be careful. Also, some of our instant products, boxed mac and cheese, instant potatoes, noodles, whether it's ramen or some kind of other quick cooking item, you want to be mindful of the hidden sodium. And also our canned products. A lot of things, and there's a lot more emphasis placed on having the low sodium or no added salt on the labels right up front. But I will still encourage you to look at the back of that nutrition facts label and see, is it really and truly a low sodium or no added salt product. Most cases it is because they have to keep up with like the fair label act per the FDA, but you want to be able to still look for yourself at the soups, the sauces, and the canned vegetables that can have added sodium. Next, we'll talk about sources of dietary fat. Dietary fat is important. Fat plays a big role in our energy needs. Fat gives us double the calories, more than protein and carbs. So don't be afraid of fat. The goal is to eat more mono unsaturated fat or the healthier fats and reduce our saturated fats, which typically come from animal products. Beef, if you're doing a lot of breakfast meats, that's a big one too, whether it's bacon, sausage, pork sausage, turkey sausage. Take a good look at your breakfast meat and see what the hidden amount of sodium may be. Butter, swapping the butter for like olive oil, canola oil, avocado oil, those things can help as well. Full fat dairy isn't something that's recommended for adults. We recommend looking into 2% non-fat dairy items. Full-fat dairy is intended for young children who are growing and developing. When we get to a certain age, we're not growing and developing anymore. So the emphasis is not placed on full-fat dairy for most adults. Heavy cream is another one. Be careful with your Alfredo sauces and different things like that. You want to be mindful of your heavy cream. Nuts, seeds, avocado, and olive oil, even avocados itself, adding them to a salad, making your homemade smashed avocado. When I did the black bean burger last week for the class, instead of doing like mustard and mayo, the traditional condiment, I did smashed guacamole on one side of the bun. The other side, we did a Greek yogurt spread with a little bit of sriracha, garlic powder, and it gave it a good balance to the black bean burger. So always look for low fat or reduced fat cheeses and dairy products. When it comes to plant-based milks, because that's another challenge, plant-based milks, you want to be able to select a plant-based milk that will give you the same nutrients and be comparable to cow's milk, whether it's oat milk, soy, almond milk, rice milk. Make sure it will give you the same amount of protein, iron. Some have a little bit more iron than others, but protein, vitamin D, and calcium as if it was cow's milk. Next, we will discuss dietary fiber. Dietary fiber is a huge, huge factor for our overall gut health, for our overall heart health, for our blood pressure support, for digestion. So I urge you to please track if you're getting the recommended amount of dietary fiber a day. For women, that's 25 grams per day. And I say to my clients, the best way to ensure you're on a good path to at least get in 20 to 25 grams of dietary fiber per day is definitely starting your day with two things, protein and dietary fiber. If you do nothing else, start with protein and fiber. Avoid the quicker breakfast items like the muffins, the pastries, danishes, anything that doesn't have a good source of protein and dietary fiber, you don't want to introduce into your body early in the morning. Okay. Now, fiber is found in 5 plant-based foods, nuts, seeds, fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. So you have plenty of opportunity to get your dietary fiber in throughout the day. Now, when you're looking at your nutrition facts label in that that total carbohydrate section, what you want to aim for is definitely looking to see that the label provides 4 or more grams of dietary fiber. Okay, that will put you in a good place to start your day in general, but also when you're looking at a serving size. Last but not least, we also want to be able to talk about what it means to support our overall cardiovascular system. That is, eating balanced meals. We want to discuss more about fiber, lean proteins, reduced fat dairy products, whether it's butter, cheese, milk, those kind of things, eggs in moderation, and be mindful of when you're combining eggs with breakfast meats, because that's a lot of fat in one particular meal. Even though those two particular items do have protein, you want to be able to be a little bit more moderate with things like your breakfast meats and eggs. And then we typically add the French toast, waffles, bagels, things that are very carb heavy and not a good source of dietary fiber. Staying active, I urge you to at least get some walking in throughout the day, breaking up your sedentary activity, and definitely looking at some kind of activity for routine physical activity. So the recommendation is not to let more than 2 consecutive days pass between exercise. So for example, if you exercise on Monday, you skip Tuesday, try not to skip Wednesday, right? If you really have to, Thursday will be your absolute last day to your next day to get a routine physical activity in, because you want to break up those 2 days of not moving your body and getting at least 30 plus minutes of physical activity. Manage stress, whether that's, coping skills in different forms. Also, hydration is key. The water intake is really important for our gut health, our overall blood pressure, making sure that our bowel movements are regular. So you want to at least strive for 64 ounces of water a day. It could be a little bit more depending on your individual needs. However, 64 ounces is kind of the recommendation. That can be 8 ounce glasses for some people that can remember it that way. So hydration is really important. Our body is made up of 70% water, so you want to be able to replenish that, because we lose water in sweat and urine in different places. Routine screening, I can't stress that enough. That's really important to get a yearly screening for lab work, your blood pressure, your cholesterol, your A1C. Didn't touch on that because we're focusing on heart health, but that definitely affects your overall metabolism if you're in the prediabetes range. So that is my presentation today on heart health and the wonderful, wonderful benefits of nutrition. We will transition to our recipe demonstration. So I did share with Rolanda the ingredients for the rice bowl. If anyone is able to follow along, we'll get right into that and then we'll do questions at the end. Did you need to say anything, Rolanda? I can just. Okay. So for anyone that wanted to follow along with the demonstration for the rice bowl, it's pretty simple. I'll run through the ingredients, and these ingredients are subject to change. It's just like a blank canvas. You could think about making this on a night where you have a lot of vegetables that's really left over, and you're kind of like trying to clean up the bin in the bottom of the refrigerator. Always have tons of veggies around, so I definitely try to use up everything that I can for the most part. So let me take my screen off of being blurred. Okay, so I do have a lot of things already prepped for the sake of time. But rice noodles is a really good option for people who are gluten-free. So it's just rice, rice flour that's been formed into noodles. So I already had mine cooked and drained and ready to go. You can absolutely do brown rice. You can substitute for any kind of whole grains, but that's definitely a good option, especially for gluten-free. Edamame, like I mentioned earlier in the session, full of nutrients, especially when it comes to a fair intake of soy, whether you're doing edamame, soybeans, soy milk, miso paste, and that's a good place to be at. I have some vegetables here already, set and ready to go. I'm just going to give my bell pepper a little slice. And you can definitely use any other kind of pepper. But bell pepper, red bell peppers gives it some nice flavor, color to your dish. I also have a little bit of cabbage. I also have some carrots that were shredded, and we're going to make a quick dressing. Let me try my parsley. I love parsley, but you can choose any kind of other green. It can be cilantro, it could be green onions. So you definitely have the opportunity to top your bowl with whatever kind of greens that you like. Another way to get more flavor. So the more parsley, the better. That should be fine. Just a rough chop on the parsley. Now, when it comes to the recipe that I sent for the rice bowl, there was not a protein added, but you can definitely add a protein. I actually have some salmon that I cooked, so I'll add salmon to mine, but you can do shrimp, you can do any kind of protein. There was a fair amount of protein from the edamame, but this is a good option for you to be able to add a piece of salmon, some shrimp. Tofu would work well if you're doing a plant-based recipe. So I did make salmon. I just had some salmon seared, and I'm going to cut mine to salmon at the end. So think about your rice bowl as having a lot of color. Now, the recipe did call for about 2 to 3 ounces of rice noodles per person, per serving. So even though the rice is gluten-free, rice still counts as a starch. So you want to be mindful of your portion when it comes to something like rice, like a heavy starch. If you're doing brown rice, same thing, but you want to just be mindful of your serving because it is a carbohydrate, which is wonderful for the body. However, you want to be able to have the right amount of balance. So I have a little bit of edamame, some cabbage, carrots, I am actually going to make the dressing really quickly. So for my dressing, I just have the vinegar and a little bit of olive oil. I'm going to add balsamic glaze because I do like balsamic, but you can feel free to add anything that you would like. So it's just a little bit of balsamic. I like the the deep flavor of balsamic. To me, it gives it such a nice balance. I'm going to add some lemon zest just to give it a little bit of brightness. And also lemon juice. We're gonna zest our lemon. And you don't want to go too deep when you're zesting your lemon. White side will be a lot more bitter. So just so you see a little bit more of that skin coming off. And then your lemon juice, nice squeeze. And with your dressing, like I said, you can make it however you'd like. Quick, easy, simple. You don't have to worry about store-bought dressing. You can if you already have it. But the goal is to give you the natural compounds from like the olive oil, the balsamic, the red wine vinegar, lemon juice, salt and pepper to taste, because that's where you want to introduce a little bit of crushed black pepper, maybe a pinch of salt if you need it. You may not, depending on how much you season your salmon and your toppings in terms of your vegetables. So the edamames I used were already shelled from the grocery store and frozen. So I didn't need to do anything to sell my edamame. I think because of the balsamic, I don't need any salt, and that's me personally, but you can definitely season and add how you would like. Now with your bowl, because you'll add your parsley and then your salmon right on top, you can go ahead and just pour your dress in, and it'll just soak up into the rice noodles and add a little bit of brightness. And then we have my salmon. And I also sauteed a little bit of mushrooms. I'm not a raw mushroom person, but if you can do raw mushrooms, by all means, by all means, that's fine. So I did salmon, just seasoned with all of the natural herbs and spices, a little bit of salt, because I just feel like protein, like salmon, chicken, those items need salt. But when it comes to like vegetables, when I made my rice noodles, you want to avoid salt as much as possible. And then just add your greens on top, and then you have something that's easy, like your rice bowl. Didn't take a lot of time, and the mommy is there. You have your vegetables. You can have as many different colors and variations that you want. We did discuss a lot about as much color on your plate as possible, right? Which is definitely something that you can share with your loved ones. It's easy and quick to make. And then you have dinner ready without having a lot of sauce. And you can actually pack this up for lunch and take it to go. If you're not a fan of carrots, you can do a different type of vegetable. So there's a lot more that you can do with something like your rice bowl. So I hope you try it. And try edamame if you're interested. It has a good flavor. You can find edamame in the shell, but or the pods they call them, but definitely when they're already shelled, it makes it a little bit easier for cooking. When you visit some restaurants, there's also edamame on the menu. So, without further ado, let's get into our questions and answers with the few minutes we have left, okay? So when it comes to meal planning, I recommend meal planning. I actually meal plan every Sunday, and that gets me through the first 3 to 4 days of the week. Meal planning is really great for your budget and keeping you from spending money and getting into the apps like Uber Eats and DoorDash. You also know the quality and the fresh ingredients you're making when you meal prep. So that's why I recommend meal prep. With your meal prep, you have the opportunity to add flavor, more balance versus some of the things that are, available even at work, sometimes in the cafeteria. Those things may be a little bit difficult for digestion and overall health. So meal prepping, I definitely recommend. What I would say for meal prepping is pick a set of vegetables and starch that you love, some kind of whole grain, and then switch your protein because it gets hard when you're eating the same dish over and over. But if you do two types of protein and maybe one vegetable and two types of starch, you can have a little bit more variation with your meal prep. Now, when it comes to supplementation for dietary supplements, the FDA puts a lot of warning and labels and lets us know that when you're supplementing, you want to be mindful. So when I talk to my clients about supplementation, I always suggest you start with some kind of routine blood work. You may be supplementing with a multivitamin and you may be over um, consuming certain things, especially the fat soluble vitamins like vitamin D. So, not that supplementation is discouraged, but you want to start with routine blood work, have a baseline if you're deficient in something and you need to supplement versus just supplementing because it's something a little bit more popular and you know someone that's supplementing with a probiotic or some kind of multivitamin. But we stress whole foods for the most part rather than just having a ton of supplementations in your daily diet. Now, eating out, when it comes to guidelines for dining and eating out, you want to be prepared as much as possible. So look up your restaurant, see where you're going, have an idea of what's ordered on or what's offered on the menu. Try sharing appetizers, sharing a meal if possible. A big recommendation is not going for the second bread basket. So if you're in Red Lobster and they're bringing out two and three of those baskets of biscuits, you're in Cheesecake Factory. We love that brown bread with butter. You want to say to the server, I know it's hot and ready in the back and the bread is fresh, but I have appetizers, I have drinks, I have my meal coming, and we don't recommend filling up on bread and butter, right? Like super early in your meal. So give your body time to open up your appetite, but receive the nutrients like protein, your vegetable, and your dietary fiber from your grains. When we talk about motivation for routine workout for women that tend to be elderly, think about a group setting, whether that's going to the local YMCA, maybe some kind of friends group, anywhere that you can find a partner or a buddy to take some walks with you, join a class, swim in. Chair exercises are great for elderly people. So you want to be able to have a companion. It's good to work out with a buddy. It's great for boosting overall morale, and you feel like you're more energized when you're working out with someone. Heart health tips, we talked a lot about that today. So add balance and color to your plate. Go for routine checkups with your primary care doctor. Listen to your body. If you know you're getting signs that something is not right, then you want to honor what your body is saying and don't wait and push the feeling off and go to the point where you're exhausted and it's a lot of fatigue. I mean, we're all tired and stretched thin, but you really want to listen to your body. Studies have shown that for women, when we are experiencing heart attacks, that we actually attribute the heart attacks to Alexa, stop. I apologize. We attribute the heart attack to just a regular set of chest pain, but it's actually something that's been pushed off and it could work its way into a fatal heart attack or some kind of huge cardiovascular event. So you want to be able to listen to your body and have a idea of what's happening. Ways to get your blood pressure down without stacking pills and medications. As early as possible, if you recognize that your blood pressure is elevated, you want to seek intervention. Of course, your primary care doctor can establish a plan with you before you're placed on blood pressure medication. But eat a lot of whole foods. Get your dietary fiber in 25 grams per day, 20 minimum. Be consistent with that. That will help you along the way with your blood pressure and your cholesterol levels. Now, I did talk about the sources of hidden sodium, so I think we have that covered. Canned foods, pre-packaged products, condiments, and just really not tasting the food ahead of time and just strictly add in or preemptively add in table salt when we sit down to eat. So that's a big source of the sodium intake that we have. Now, ways to cook better with avocado versus olive oil. I did olive oil for my salmon. You can do avocado oil. It's more so a taste preference. Also, price plays a big factor, but both olive oil and avocado oil are considered the healthy fats, those monounsaturated fats. If you're looking for a oil that is a little bit more cost effective, you can try canola. Canola oil is a fair oil as well, and it's kind of neutral. It doesn't have the taste of avocado or olive oil. Last but not least, also when we talk about our BMI and overall health and being at a healthy weight, BMI is a factor that we use when we look at height and weight comparison. The other challenge is that we also want to be mindful of our waist to hip circumference or ratio. And for women, that number is if we're sticking to a waist to hip ratio of around 0.7, maybe 0.8. Again, that's taking your waist in inches, dividing it by your hip in inches. You want to be able to have an idea of what that is besides your BMI and your overall number on the scale. What the waist to hip circumference tells us, that ratio, is are we more at risk for holding on to that visceral fat that is typically designed to cushion our organs, right, in our abdominal region. But if it's deemed that it's too much of that visceral fat, it can increase our risk for heart disease. So look at other aspects besides the scale and the overall number on the scale. Look at your BMI also, but waist to hip circumference is another big one. Now, GLPs and the effect on heart muscles, I wasn't really sure if you meant the benefits of a GLP when you have like heart disease. But there's certain GLP medications out there that are designed, and specifically one of the mechanisms is to support cardiovascular health. So when we're looking at things like Manjaro or some of the other classes that help with getting some of that excess fluid from around the pulmonary cavity in our chest, that is supportive of heart health. Also, lowering our cholesterol, that's important as well. So consult your doctor if you are interested in something like a GLP. There are side effects to everything, but maybe you can take a small dose and see if it works for you. Heart flutters. When it comes to heart flutters or palpitations, and you can really feel your heartbeat rapidly or a little bit more pronounced, that is something you don't want to ignore. I found out I had iron deficiency anemia because of my heart palpitations, and I just thought I was tired and overworked, but it actually led me to having a trip to the ER and finding out that my iron was really low to the point of transfusion because of my heart palpitations. So you want to be mindful and just not ignore cues in your body because that could mean something else. And talking to your primary care doctor and making sure that they advocate for you, you advocate for yourself, and you're listening to those symptoms overall that you experience. simple ways to make Southern meals more healthy and friendly. So earlier when I talked about that quercetin compound that's naturally occurring in our greens, we want to take and enjoy our things like our Southern food, our greens, mac and cheese and all those fried chicken, and look at how you can improve that. So for the greens, instead of using like smoked ham or ham hock, you can probably go for something like a low sodium smoked turkey leg, um, leading with more seasonings and herbs and spices versus just salt. Air frying some of your protein. Even if you bread your chicken lightly, you throw it in the air fryer versus deep frying it. You can avoid a lot of that extra sodium and fat if you think about using different methods like air frying mac and cheese, reducing using reduced fat cheese, cutting out in some of the butter, and maybe different ways that you can flavor your southern food without looking at a lot of the sodium saturated fat and the heavy breadings or carbs that come with a lot of those things. And last but not least, there is a question about a diet specific for aortic aneurysm. I will say with something that specific, you want to be able to seek, treatment, of course, with your healthcare provider, and then they can streamline a more specific cardiac and heart healthy diet. But everything I did discuss here today will support something like an aortic aneurysm, if that's your case. So thank you very much for bearing with me. I know we went a little bit over in time, but I really enjoyed this session with everyone tonight, and please feel free to, you know, uh, I encourage you to be able to read more and share more information about heart health and the benefits of nutrition.
Thank you so much, Lonnie. And this time I'm going to turn the floor. Um, I'm going to give the floor to Ebony Rooks. Ebony?
Good evening, sorors and friends. We want to thank you so much for coming and spending some time with us tonight. You could have been anywhere on this rainy Thursday, but we thank you for spending some time with us and investing time in your heart health. And thank you, Ms. Freeman, for spending time with us and giving us such valuable information. I didn't get to cook along with you tonight, but I took the recipe and I'm going to definitely incorporate that. So I just want to give a special thank you just for everyone attending. And I just want to also put a shameless plug in there as we're wrapping up our Forward to Fitness month for our health and wellness. On next month, on March the 25th, it is open to Soras and friends, where we will be concluding our Heart Healthy series. It is on March the 25th. And you can go to our chapter website that should be updated on this by this weekend. We will be at the Logan Center. The doors will open at 6:30 p.m. and we will start promptly at 7. And we will have as a guest fitness instructor, Kara, who does Sky Fitness. All our efforts this past month has been dedicated to supporting our Crimson Swimmers. It is a program that we put together to help close the gap for minority children who do not know how to swim. So we're partnered with GW Carver Elementary School, where we provide 40. Last year we provided 20 swim lessons to students, and this year we're doubling that effort to 40 students. So all your donations towards the Forward to Fitness, $35, it all goes towards that initiative. To sponsor one child is $110, and there's more information that's detailed on the website about that. So we appreciate y'all supporting us and being with us tonight. And I will turn it back over to Sora Patrick.
Thank you so much, Sarah Rooks. Again, I just want to reiterate what Ebony shared. This evening's presentation and virtual program was a success because of you. You could have been anywhere, but you chose to spend your Thursday evening with the Concord Alumnae chapter. As Ebony asked, please take the time to complete the survey that was placed in the chat. And again, Lonnie, we want to thank you for such an informative and practical session, for sharing your expertise and showing us that heart healthy eating can be both simple and delicious. I tell you, in less than 75 45 minutes. You went from A to Z in nutrition and you answered all of our questions. We sincerely appreciate you. If you haven't already done so, please show Lonnie some love in the chat with your words and our emojis. I hope each and every one of you leave tonight feeling empowered to identify your risk factors, inspired to make healthy choices, as well as being encouraged to try new recipes featuring the food we discussed tonight in your own kitchen. Remember that taking care of your heart health is a daily journey. Okay, taking care of your heart health is a daily journey. So every day that we have the opportunity to make decisions, we want to make the right choices concerning our health. So please be sure to continue visiting our website, www.concordalumnidst.org, to stay connected with us in terms of our upcoming community events and initiatives. We look forward to seeing you again real soon. Remember all the information Ebony shared. Good night. Take care. God bless and stay healthy.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Rolanda.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Thank you for attending.